Cities around the world attracted a hodgepodge of migrating people. Many were rural peoples unable to sustain themselves in an overpopulated countryside or to compete with mechanized agriculture and cheap, imported grains from the American Midwest. Political unrest, ethnic conflict, and religious persecution persuaded others to look abroad. Uprooted rural people went to where the jobs were, largely to industrializing cities in Europe and North and South America, Australia, and New Zealand. Transoceanic migration extended internal European migration trends. European laborers had traditionally migrated to work in seasonal harvests, and then they migrated for work in the continent's burgeoning industries. Advances in transportation made migration across the ocean seem like the next natural step. In the late 19th century, steamships could cross the Atlantic in 2 weeks or less, compared with sailing ships that took as long as 42 days. But economic reasons were not the only motivation for migration. Religious persecution catalyzed the movement of Eastern European Jews to the U.S. Forced to live in the Pale of Settlement in the Russian Empire under severe restrictions, Jews suffered violent attacks on their villages, known as pogroms, with increasing frequency beginning in 1881, when they were wrongly blamed for the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. America fever brought immigrants from new parts of Europe, from places previously unrepresented in earlier migrations. For the first time, Southern and Eastern Europeans arrived in large numbers. While Northern and Western Europeans still dominated from 1870 to 1900, making up roughly 2/3 of immigrants, a flood of Southern and Eastern Europeans, such as Italians, Greeks, Poles, Hungarians, and Russian Jews, accounted for the other third. Between 1900 and 1914, these immigrants surpassed those from Northern and Western Europe. Men made up a large majority of immigrants, nearly 70% of the immigration population between 1880 and 1910. The origins and massive numbers of these migrants led Americans to refer to the new immigration. Native-born Americans tended to use this designation as a negative label, unfavorably contrasting new immigrants with old immigrants from the British Isles and Northern Europe. In comparison, new immigrants seemed especially foreign. Their cultures, languages, and religions seemed too different for them to ever become true Americans. Most were Roman Catholic or Jewish, making them especially problematic to native-born Protestant Americans who believed that they were unfit for self-government. Roman Catholics, they argued, could never be loyal Americans because of their primary allegiance to the Pope. Jews seemed especially threatening to Americans who thought of their country as a Christian nation. Asian immigrants, especially the Chinese, seemed even more different and incapable of assimilating into American culture.